The Three Kingdoms period was maybe the craziest era in Chinese history. By 220 AD, the once great Han Dynasty had collapsed, and three warlords had risen to consolidate their power across the region. The Wu, Shu, and Wei dynasties would rule for the next 60 years, until their mutually assured destruction and the rise of a new regional power, the Jin Dynasty. The period was steeped in mystery and intrigue. There were stories of ghosts and sorcery, bizarre battle tactics, love triangles, and leaders who loved writing poetry almost as much as they loved wiping out entire families of rivals who got in their way. Here are the three kingdoms that took over China. Supernatural yellow turbans. Three brothers stood on a hilltop, surrounded by their followers chanting. They wore yellow turbans and flowing robes. As they chanted, rain clouds appeared on the horizon and the wind started picking up. These Taoist mystics could manipulate the heavens, thought the awestruck followers. One of the brothers supposedly motioned for a man in the front row to come up. The man had a limp, which he said had plagued him for years. The brother placed his hand on the leg, uttered a few solemn incantations, and voila! The man could walk normally for the first time in years. The followers gasped. It was a real clutch your pearls type moment. They bowed their heads in reverence. If these men could heal the sick, then surely they could liberate them from the starvation and disease that had ravaged the region under the Han Dynasty. These three brothers were Zhongzhu, Zhongbao, and Zhongliang. The oldest, Zhongzhu, was the leader. He was known as the General of Heaven and promised his followers that if they took his special medicine, they wouldn't get wounded in battle and could fight without fear. His brother, Zhongliang, took the name General of the People, and his older brother, Zhongbao, became known as General of the Earth. Together, they called their campaign the Way of Peace. There wasn't much peaceful about it, though. They railed against the ruling Han Dynasty, who they said had lost their divine mandate. That mandate had passed to the brothers, according to the brothers at least. The dynasty was collapsing. Widespread corruption among officials, out-of-control taxation, natural disasters like floods and famine, and widespread pestilences had left a vast majority of the peasantry teetering on the brink of death. Many had lost their lands and were living in abject poverty. So these three brothers took the region by storm. People flocked to their cause, drawn by their charisma and mystical abilities, and repulsed by the mismanagement of the Han. Their slogan was, "The blue sky is dead, the yellow sky will soon rise. In this year, there will be prosperity under heaven." The brothers believed in a coming apocalypse, one where the skies would turn yellow and a new government would rise from the ashes of the old. They wore yellow turbans as a nod to their belief. By 184 AD, there was a sea of people wearing those yellow turbans. The Yellow Turban Rebellion was about to kick off, but it almost didn't. Like any good story of revolt, the early stages of this one were marked by plotting and betrayal. In the months leading up to the rebellion, Zhongzhu sent a guy named Ma Yuanhe to travel around and recruit more followers. He was even able to convince a few members of the Han imperial court to join up, right under the nose of Emperor Ling. It was looking good for the Way of Peace campaign. The downfall. But then a guy named Tang Zhou very nearly messed everything up. Tang Zhou was initially one of the fervent believers in the Way of Peace and its potential to bring about societal change. But as the planning of the revolt progressed, Tang Zhou felt increasingly sidelined and excluded. You smell that? Smells like hate. Feeling sighted, Tang Zhou reported Ma Yuanhe's actions to the Han authorities, laying bare the details of the planned uprising. Didn't I tell you he was a hater? Acting on this information, the officials arrested Ma Yuanhe, leading to his gruesome sentence killing in Luoyang, the capital of the Han Empire. Emperor Ling, alarmed at the scale and audacity of the alleged theory, especially given the growing discontent and the numerous followers the Way of Peace had amassed, reacted swiftly. He commissioned Zhou Bin, prefect of the palace parks, with the responsibility of investigating the extent of the theory and weeding out anyone who was involved. In the subsequent crackdown, hundreds were arrested and killed, with many innocents likely caught in the dragnet. But that didn't deter the Zhong brothers. In March, more than 350,000 yellow turban-wearing rebels revolted across the empire. Chaos ensued. Zhongzhu died of an illness despite his pedigree as a healer. He was apparently unable to keep himself healthy. His younger brothers knew that if the news of his death got out, The rebellion might fall apart, so they kept his demise a secret. Things would unravel for the Yellow Turbans from there. The rebels were defeated again and again by Han imperial forces. One of the worst came shortly after Zhu's death. Zhang Liang took up command and met the forces of Han General Wang Fu Song in Guangdong County. The two armies were pretty much evenly matched. Song realized that a direct frontal assault wouldn't work out, so he sat down in his tent one night with his inner circle and devised a cunning plan. His army would sit back and make it seem like they were weary and downcast. They'd chill, kick at the dirt, make it look like they were basically defeated and preparing for a retreat. Zhang Liang and the Yellow Turbans would be lulled into a false sense of security. Then, in the cover of night, the Han forces launched a devastating surprise attack. This night raid was a tactical masterstroke, catching the Yellow Turbans off guard. Zhang Liang was killed in action along with an estimated 30,000 of his rebel followers. As the news of the battle spread and panic ensued, another 50,000 rebels were reported to have drowned in a tragic attempt to flee across a river. Less than a year after the revolt started, it was effectively squashed. The last surviving Zhang brother, Zhang Bao, would die soon after under unclear circumstances. But factions of Yellow Turbans would persist for the next few decades. The revolt further destabilized the Han Empire. By the year 210, it had all but fractured into warring regions controlled by different warlords, more than 12 of them. Various warlords and generals such as Cao Cao, Liu Bei, and Sun Quan rose to prominence during these campaigns against the Yellow Turbans, setting the stage for their roles as the founders of the empire during the Three Kingdoms era. The Oath in the Peach Garden. Liu Bei came from humble beginnings. Although he was distantly related to the imperial Han family, his father passed away and the family was left destitute, broke, without anything. To make ends meet as a child, Liu Bei was forced to sell straw shoes and mats on the streets of Zhou County, just south of modern-day Beijing. Things turned around for him, though. When he was 15, his mother sent him to study under Liu Ji, an influential Han philosopher general. By 221 AD, Liu Bei had risen through the ranks to become one of the most powerful men in China and declared himself king of Shu, one of three kingdoms that emerged from the wreckage of the Han dynasty. Before that, though, he had to navigate decades of war and instability in the region. The Yellow Turban Rebellion was destabilizing everything, and it was around that time when Liu Bei and two of his closest allies made a legendary pact to help save the Han dynasty. Those allies were Zhang Fei and Guan Yu, who would go on to become two of his most feared and accomplished generals. The pact they made was called the Oath in the Peach Garden, and the story goes like this. In the face of chaos caused by the Yellow Turban Rebellion, Liu Bei was pretty bummed out about the state of the Han dynasty and wanted to take up arms to help restore order. While he was expressing his concerns aloud, Zhang Fei, a wealthy butcher, overheard him. Zhang Fei was moved by Liu Bei's sentiment and offered to join him in his cause. Soon after, Guan Yu, a warrior who had recently escaped from some city magistrates for killing a local bully, heard of Liu Bei's and Zhang Fei's intentions and decided to join them. Guan Yu sought them out and offered his services, impressed by their commitment to righteousness and the Han dynasty. After recognizing their shared values, the three of them decided to solidify their newfound brotherhood. They held a ceremony in a peach garden in Liu Bei's residence where they swore to be brothers and pledged their lives to restoring the Han dynasty and helping out the common people. They vowed that although they were not born on the same day, they would die on the same day. The trio then gathered a militia and set out to aid the Han dynasty in quelling the Yellow Turban Rebellion. It was the beginning of their shared journey through the wild era of the Three Kingdoms. It would be one of shifting alliances, fierce battles, betrayal, and ultimately, tragedy. Plotting. In October of 208, Liu Bei and his two generals faced off against Cao Cao, a rival warlord who was starting to consolidate his own power to the north. Now, Cao Cao would go on to found the second of the Three Kingdoms, Wei, in 220. But first, he had to solidify his position. Cao Cao had managed to take the reins of the crumbling Han Empire away from the imperial court after Emperor Ling died in 189. His successor and the last official emperor of the Han dynasty, Emperor Xian, was a weak ruler, and by 196, Cao Cao effectively became the shadow emperor of the Han dynasty, with direct control of the capital Luoyang, making him the most powerful of the warlords vying for power. Liu Bei and Cao Cao were initially allies, although hesitant ones. But in 200, that fell apart when Liu Bei turned on Cao Cao. For real, a few people turned on him. It's said that Emperor Xian, distressed over the fact that he was basically a puppet in Xiao Xiao's hands, met with a close ally, General Dong Cheng, one night in his palace chambers. It's likely that the palace setting was luxurious, yet somber, with the weight of political machinations and crumbling empire hanging in the air. Candles or lanterns illuminating the room, casting a soft, flickering glow on the emperor and his confidant. Sounded like a heck of a night. During their private meeting, Emperor Xian discreetly revealed to Dong Cheng the secret edict written on silk, hidden within the folds of his own robe. The edict declared Cao Cao a traitor and called for him to be taken out. Xian and Cheng started recruiting plotters, including Liu Bei. But before the act could be carried out, Liu Bei took an army to go fight another rival warlord. While he was out, Cao Cao learned of the plot and had everyone involved and their entire families killed. He then set his sights on finding Liu Bei, who had basically defected. Cao Cao caught up with Liu Bei in Shu province to the south. He was already down there fighting another warlord named Yuan Shao, and in a pretty ballsy move, he set up a defensive position across the river from Shao's army, and then gambled that Shao wouldn't attack and took part of his army to go make a surprise attack on Liu Bei's forces. It worked. Liu Bei's army was routed, and he and Zhang Fei were forced to flee. Guan Yu, however, wasn't so lucky. Guan Yu's arm surgery. Guan Yu, who had split from Liu Bei, was eventually captured by Cao Cao's forces. Now, at first glance, you'd think this would be a bad thing. Nothing good usually happens when a soldier falls into the hands of the enemy. But for Guan Yu, it was different. But before we get into what happened next, let's look at a little story about the general that highlights how tough he really was and how pretty much anyone would be lucky to have him on their side. Story goes like this. After a battle somewhere, we don't know exactly which one or when exactly this was, Guan Yu was wounded in the arm by a poison-tipped arrow. The poison started to spread. It was a potentially fatal situation. So a physician named Hua Tuo, one of the most famous doctors in Chinese history, was brought to treat him. Hua Tuo told Guan Yu that the poison had reached the bone and that he would need to cut open the arm to scrape away the infection. Understandably, this wouldn't be the most pleasant of procedures, but instead of shying away or requesting the Chinese version of painkillers, Guan Yu asked if a game of chess could be set up. And then he just started playing chess and drinking wine with an attendant while Hua Tuo cut open his arm and performed the surgery. He was apparently unfazed the whole time. Now, we're not sure whether he finished his game of chess or if the surgery took so long he had to play 2 games, or 3. Anyway, it must have been an excruciating game of chess. You want to hear a Guan Yu chess joke? What did the doctor say to Guan Yu after his arm surgery? You should be fine, but come back in 2 weeks just so I can check, mate. Ah, you see what I did there? Cao Cao knew that Guan Yu was a man of steel-type warrior who would be good to have on his side. Instead of punishing him or throwing him in a jail cell, Cao Cao treated him with utmost respect and showered him with gifts, including the legendary red-hair horse. Now, this was a horse so strong and powerful that it could reportedly run over 300 miles a day without getting tired. Riding the red-hair horse was like racing a Ferrari against a bunch of Toyota Corollas. Guan Yu went on to serve Cao Cao for 2 years. He fought in the Battle of Broma, where he reportedly mowed down lines of the warlord Yuan Shao's men, stormed up to one of his generals, Yan Luang, and removed his head, bringing it back to Cao Cao as a trophy and a symbol of his loyalty. Yet despite all the honors and gifts he received from Cao Cao, Guan Yu's heart remained with Liu Bei. When he learned that Liu Bei was alive and had regrouped in Jing province, Guan Yu decided to leave Cao Cao and reunite with his sworn brother. Before leaving, he wrote a letter to Cao Cao explaining his reasons. Cao Cao was so impressed by Guan Yu's character and spirit that he let him go, even if that meant letting him return into the open arms of a sworn enemy. In his journey to find Liu Bei, Guan Yu passed through several gates and checkpoints. At each point, he announced his intention to leave and return to Liu Bei. He was an honest guy, and he wouldn't slink around in the shadows. The journey is famously referred to as Guan Yu's Ride of 1,000 Miles, where he traversed 5 mountain passes and slew 6 generals. It's worth noting, though, that this specific detail, especially the dramatics of the journey, might have been a bit sensationalized. Eventually, Guan Yu was reunited with Liu Bei, though more drama was still to come. The Hermit and the Crouching Dragon. By 207. Cao Cao had united the northern provinces under his rule and was staring down Liu Bei and his generals in the southern Jing province. Liu Bei needed help. His 2 generals and oath brothers, Zhang Fei and Guan Yu, were great, but the threat from Cao Cao was greater. Liu Bei went on a journey to visit a mysterious scholar and hermit, Sima Wei, to seek out his advice on the matter. The two talked in the study of his remote home in northern Jing province, close to the border with Cao Cao's increasingly powerful northern empire. Amid scrolls and Confucian art, the hermit told Liu Bei that he should find someone named Crouching Dragon. This man had the wisdom and had the bravery necessary to help out the aspiring emperor. Liu Bei thanked the hermit and went out to find this guy. Crouching Tiger's real name was Zhuge Liang. He'd go on to become one of the most influential tacticians and politicians of the Three Kingdoms period. Liu Bei ended up meeting with Zhuge Liang 3 times in 207, and Liang lived up to the hype bestowed upon him by the hermit Sima Wei. Liang suggested that Bei beef up his forces by taking in the hundreds of thousands of refugees fleeing the chaos of the northern provinces under Cao Cao's control and making them citizens of Zheng province. That way he could tax them and have them enlist in the army. Pretty genius, thought Liu Bei, and he did just that. Zhang Fei's roar. But then in September of 208, as Liu Bei and his army were traveling with a caravan of 100,000 refugees near the northern border, Cao Cao struck. He had sent 5,000 strong cavalry to intercept them. A determined Liu Bei refused to abandon the refugees and sent his general Guan Yu down the Han River with over 100 ships so they could escape Cao Cao's wrath. The Battle of Changban, as it's become known, was really more of a chase than a battle. Cao Cao's army pursued Liu Bei, who was forced to flee with Zhuge Liang and Zhang Fei. Just as Cao Cao's cavalry was about to descend on Liu Bei's forces, Zhang Fei and a handful of his most loyal warriors took a stand at Changban Bridge. The story goes that he ordered the bridge to be destroyed behind him, and then he stood defiantly at its head. When Cao Cao's forces approached, Zhang Fei unleashed a thunderous yell, his voice echoing across the river, full of fury and defiance. Zhang Fei's reputation as a feared warrior in battle, combined with the sheer audacity of the stand, apparently caused Cao Cao's forces to hesitate. Well, either that or they hesitated because there was a madman screaming at them from across the river. The story goes that a few enemy soldiers, overcome by the terror of Zhang Fei's scream, even fell from their horses and died. I mean, what kind of siren's wail was this? While the event is most certainly hyperbole, Zhang's bravery was said to have created a crucial delay that allowed Liu Bei's main force to retreat safely and regroup. The burning of the linked ships. Enter the third founder of one of the Three Kingdoms, Sun Quan. Sun Quan founded the kingdom Wu. He was a lot younger than either Liu Bei or Cao Cao, but he was smart and strategic and knew how to play the diplomacy game. In 208, Sun Quan entered into an alliance with Liu Bei and another warlord named Lu Qi against Cao Cao. Sun Quan brought a lot of cards to the table. One of those cards was a general named Gan Ning. Gan Ning used to be a pirate. He and his men would sail the Yangtze River, raiding ships and disrupting trade. They say he wore bells around his belt so everyone knew when he was coming, enemies and friends alike. He definitely wasn't one for camouflage. There was no going on the low-low for this guy. Gan Ning was also a ruthless guy, but he was also fair. He was famous for redistributing the wealth accumulated from raids pretty evenly amongst his men. He was also a poet and would sit on his boat on calm days waxing philosophical about the nature of the universe and the meaning of life before throwing down his notebook and picking up his sword, bells jangling, hoping that the ship that was passing was loaded with valuables and maybe some more bells to add to his growing collection. Gan Ning eventually gave up his pirating ways and threw his lot in with Sun Quan, and together they threw their lot in with Liu Bei against Cao Cao. It all came to a head in one of the most famous battles in Chinese history, the Battle of the Red Cliffs. Like we've mentioned before, Cao Cao had become a force. Even with the triple alliance between Sun Quan, Liu Bei, and Lu Qi, Cao Cao's army was still larger. Some sources say it was nearly 1 million strong and it was moving south. Somewhere along the Yangtze River in modern-day Hubei province, things got heated. Recognizing the challenges of facing Cao Cao in a direct confrontation given the disparity in numbers, the Allied forces had to resort to creative thinking. Sun Quan's chief commanders, Gan Ning and Zhou Yu, along with Liu Bei's chief strategist, Zhuge Liang, devised a plan to exploit a key weakness in Cao Cao's forces. The majority of his army was from the north and pretty bad at naval warfare. They got seasick while on the boats. To combat this, Cao Cao had his ships chained together in order to reduce the rocking and thus minimize seasickness. This setup presented an opportunity. Liu Bei and his generals planned something pretty crafty. They pretended to surrender, and as part of the fake surrender, they sent a few of their most valuable ships to meet Cao Cao's fleet. The ships were known as Chong, warships covered in more leather armor than a biker riding a Harley-Davidson. Cao Cao must have been feeling pretty confident, watching these ships floating towards him, dejected and defeated. But what he didn't know was that they were full of kindling and oil. Once they were close enough, the ships were set ablaze, and with the enemy ships chained together, the fire spread rapidly, causing chaos and devastation in Cao Cao's ranks. But none of this could have happened if the wind wasn't blowing in the right direction. That's where Zhuge Liang came in. Now for sure, he was known for his wisdom and battlefield savvy. But like the three brothers who kicked off the Yellow Turban Rebellion, he was also a mystic who could control the weather. He climbed to the top of a cliff, built an altar, and just before the dummy ships were sent off, Zhuge Liang performed a ritual that helped change the wind's direction. Miraculously, according to the tales at least, the wind shifted to the southeast, turning a slight strategic advantage into a sweeping victory for the Allied forces. The fire attack and the ensuing battle inflicted heavy casualties on Cao Cao's forces, forcing him to retreat northward. This battle made sure that China would remain tripartite for the next few decades, with the Wei, Shu, and Wu kingdoms balancing against each other. End of the road. Nothing lasts forever, though. In 219, the relationship between Sun Quan and Liu Bei deteriorated. Sun Quan turned against Bei, allied with Cao Cao, and took out Guan Yu, who was overseeing Jing province. A year later, Cao Cao died and left the newly established kingdom of Wei to his son, Cao Pi. Liu Bei would pass away 3 years later from illness, in 223, after a failed attempt to avenge Guan Yu's death against Sun Quan. Zhuge Liang would live on for another 10 years. He would try again to conquer the Wei kingdom to the north in the name of the Shu kingdom, hoping to fulfill his friend and brother-in-arms Liu Bei's hope for reuniting the Han Empire. He would never do it, though. And as the story goes, Liang anticipated his own death and created a wooden statue of himself to lead the army after his death as a way to delay the news of his passing and prevent a potential attack from the Wei army during the Shu's retreat. The Three Kingdoms period would endure until 280, when the Wu, Shu, and Wei kingdoms finally fell to an upstart dynasty called the Jin. But that's for a whole other video. Let us know if you guys want that. Thanks for watching. Let us know what you think in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more Nutty History.